Hey there YouTube, I'm Joe and you're watching my channel Ink&Iron, and I'm finally doing it. This is the Victorinox SwissChamp review. So this is my SwissChamp. I got this on eBay, so this is secondhand, although I took off the scales, cleaned it up, and replaced them with some new plus scales, adding a couple of additional tools and a very nice look. I really like these transparent scales. I think they add a very cool sort of industrial element to the design. But anyway, the way I carry this is a deep pocket clip on here, and I have taken this to work. I've used this in my personal life at home, and a very, very functional, highly productive tool to use. So I have enjoyed it quite a bit, and we are going to go through every single implement. I have not necessarily used everything on here. I think there's like 23 different tools or something. So I haven't used everything extensively, but there are some tools that I really love on here that I'm excited to share with you. So first things first, we're going to take off this jiggly little pocket clip, or otherwise it's going to be rattling the entire time we do this review. And I guess that's the first tool, is this little lanyard loop. Some people grind this off. I do find it useful for adding a pocket clip. Some people just put a lanyard on theirs. But yeah, I think this is about the biggest Victorinox that you could reasonably fit in a pocket. You know, if you're wearing like women's jeans or something, maybe not. Usually pretty scant on space there, but as a dude who wears, you know, cargo pants and whatnot, like this is not a problem for me to carry. So, you know, take that into consideration if you're going to be getting this tool for yourself, how you want to carry it. It is a little bit of a brick. Let me break out a ruler and give you some specs real quick. So the width, let's call it about, I don't know, what is that, like almost 30 millimeters, about 3 centimeters, inch and an eighth, inch and a quarter, something like that. So pretty wide. Thickness, 23 millimeters, call it 3/4 of an inch or so. And the length should be 89 millimeters. Yeah, pretty much bang on there. And it's looking like, what is that, 3.5 inches or so. So a fairly substantial tool. And let's grab a weight. Let's check it on the scale. Okay, 0 grams. 190.45, cool. Which is 6.72 ounces approximately. So yeah, fairly substantial for a relatively small footprint, and my only basis of comparison is pens and knives. So if you're a multi-tool person, you're like, oh, this is pretty compact. But yeah, this is a great Swiss Army knife. So let's start getting into the tools here. Let's start on the back side because there's not quite as many here. So this is a reamer. This is also an emergency stitching awl, so you can put a very coarse thread through there and kind of like repair a tent or something by roughly stitching it through. I have, I think, reground this back portion. No, sorry, that's on my other Victorinox. So this could use a little bit of work. This is a bit worn, but I have used this a bit, and it's quite good for reaming copper pipe, PVC pipe, stuff like that, and general scraping and poking tasks. So yeah, overall a good reamer. It very much reminds me of the one on Leatherman multi-tools. So if you like that one, you'll probably like this one. This is the parcel hook. Some of you have probably seen this and wondered what it was. In Switzerland, they get their newspapers and magazines and stuff in a bundle, so it's bundled together with twine, and this is the perfect little hook to grab that twine, and you have a nice handle to carry your parcels with. So this is the parcel hook. This is quite a strong implement. I actually have a video where I hang from this hook my full body weight, so approximately like 140 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilograms. I'll put it down here. But yeah, you can put quite a bit of weight on here. So if you need to, say, pull a line, like you've got some thread or something, you're trying to make a knot or undo a knot, this can be pretty useful for that. I could also see you using it as like a wire bender, so have some copper wire. You could potentially do a little bit of work like that. So yeah, the parcel hook or multi-use hook has various uses of its own and does come in handy sometimes. This is a small flathead driver. Not super useful. I don't think I've used this much, mostly because there are more accessible flathead drivers on here, but this one is quite fine. It does have a little bit of a taper here at the end, so if you need to do some fine scraping or poking stuff, I suppose you could do it with this as well. I have to lift this tool in order to access this guy. There we go. This is a chisel. Yeah, little dedicated mini chisel, and I'm trying to be careful here because it is fairly sharp, although it does need a resharpen. I have used this a little bit. It's not super useful. It would be great if it were a sort of parallel facing tool instead of a perpendicular one, and also if it were on the edge of the SwissChamp rather than kind of in the middle. There's not an excellent way to grip this really. It's a bit clunky, but then again it's a very small chisel, so very fine lightweight duty chisel, and for that purpose it's okay. It'll serve if you need a chisel rather than a knife or a scraping implement. Alright, the corkscrew, and this has a bonus tool on here. This is the eyeglass screwdriver. I don't wear eyeglasses, but I do wear safety glasses, and every once in a while you need to like get in somewhere with something more substantial than the straight pin, which is also right here, and this comes in handy for that, light duty scraping tasks. The corkscrew, it does work. This isn't my favorite wine opening device, however, perfectly functional corkscrew and a nice meaty handle to yank a cork out. And actually, I have a cork here. How about that? Yeah, kind of digs it out a little bit. Not the best corkscrew, but it will serve if you need to do that. So that's the corkscrew. Let's put our little driver back in there. Now we can talk about the straight pin, which is hiding just below the corkscrew. This one, I'm not sure if it's the scales that I have, but it kind of fits in there weird. It's a little loose, so I'm going to give it a slight bend here. That should help it stay in, I think. Give it a little more to grip onto there. Anyway, the straight pin does come in handy. I have actually taken this and knocked the rust off of some old vintage slip joint knives. So yeah, this has come in handy as a collector of other older steel implements. Can't say I've used this to like pin clothing or anything, but it is a very fine point, and yeah, just handy to have in general. Okay, moving on to the scale tools. You have your classic toothpick, and part of the reason I replaced the scales on this guy was so I could replace the toothpick as well. I don't like to get a used one of these and then use the toothpick or trust that underneath the scales is clean. This particular SwissChamp, it was pretty clean, although I went ahead and cleaned it with solvent and buffed it under there. You can see how shiny it is. But yeah, toothpick, good for picking your teeth, as you might imagine. There is also a little ballpoint pen, and it's not much to speak of. It's a pretty basic little ballpoint, but it serves the function, and if you need a pen and don't have a pen, you can grab one out of your Victorinox, so very handy. On the other side, we have the logo, nicely laid over that scale, and we have a set of tweezers. Ooh, it's in there pretty tight. I don't use this tool very much, but when I need it, it is quite handy. Sometimes there's a place you just can't quite reach with your fingers, or your unibrow is getting away from you, as mine is wont to do. This does come in handy. Okay, now on to the main side. So have our classic small blade on here. It does sit up in line with the rest of the tool, so a nice handle on there. And here's what I mean by this is the maximum tool size for keeping in your pocket, because any wider than this, sort of in this dimension, and you'd be like way out here trying to get a purchase on that and use a knife blade, which I don't very much recommend. You should have a comfortable handle, but not one that is too big to wield. So yeah, this is functional. It is pretty sharp. You can see I've used it as there's quite a bit of junk still on there. I did not clean this before the video. But yeah, small blade right next to its big brother, larger blade. Also kind of dirty, kind of oily. I brought this to work, so you know, it has seen some use. This is a pretty good blade. I do appreciate that there's a little sharpening notch down here so you can hand sharpen it back into shape. Yeah, very stain resistant, rust resistant, which is like, you know, part of the whole point of this tool. I know a lot of these end up in tackle boxes for good reason. We also have a file on here. I have to say Leatherman does a better file in their T-shank replaceable file, although this one will serve. It is not up to the hardness that I would like in particular. So if you are filing wood or plastic, this will serve just fine. If you're filing metal, you're going to have a much harder time. Something like brass or copper would probably be okay, but any type of steel, this is going to be only marginally harder than most steels that I've encountered. So this did not prove incredibly useful to me, which was a bit disappointing because that's part of the reason I got the SwissChamp, was to have a file. But it is just like an American file where you move forward and that's the cutting action, very much like a saw. And it is nice to have file teeth on the spine here. Excuse me, getting a little mush-mouthed. But yeah, cross-cut pattern on there. You can file your nails, that's not an issue. So it could be useful in that way. Your mileage will probably vary compared to mine. Let's see, here's a very thin tool I need to be careful taking out. This is the wood saw. I have not used this too much, used it a couple of times, and I know that it works well. It's not the cleanest cut, but it is quite an aggressive tooth pattern on there, so live wood would probably be the best use case for this. Dried hardwood is going to be a little more difficult, and as I said, not going to leave quite as amazing a finish. Also, as you can tell, because it's perfectly in line, you can see straight down to the bandana down here, there is no allowance for a kerf. So normally on a saw, the teeth are slightly splayed out. So instead of being straight like this, they are kind of canted outward. And that means that the back of the saw moves through a wider slot generated by the teeth. This will bind up on you in a very long cut. But then again, this is a multi-tool saw. So if you're using it in that context, you are probably pushing it a little too hard. Yeah, sawing tree limbs, sawing small pieces of wood, this will serve fine. Here's a tool that haven't really used much. This is a combination tool, ruler and fish scaler, and I believe this part up here can be like a hook remover, fish hook remover. I'm not a fisherman, so I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I have used this for a bit of scraping, general scraping and, you know, mushing things around. But haven't used it too much. The ruler seems accurate, and it's for some reason in inches instead of millimeters, which strikes me as odd. Oh, there you go. There's your centimeter ruler on the backside. But yeah, if you need a fish scaler, I don't know how well this does, so probably take someone else's word on it for that. But if you need a small ruler, Victorinox has you covered in the SwissChamp. Alright, here's one of the best tools on here, in my opinion. This is the large Victorinox scissors, and Victorinox has very nice scissors, very precisely ground and very precisely aligned. You can see mine has some schmutz on it because I have used these multiple occasions, and they are quite easy to touch up and resharpen if you need to, because you can splay them all the way out like this and have access to both blade edges, and then bring them back together and just do this a couple times to hone them. So yeah, I quite like these. The spring is replaceable if you ever need to. It can occasionally sort of walk out of alignment, but is pretty easy to move back into place because there's a little groove right here on the back side of the moving part of the scissors. So yeah, and I gotta say, it's nice that when you depress it this way, it only pushes the tool more into a locked position rather than, maybe being this way where it threatens to close on you. So yeah, very well thought out design. Pretty decent span here. I'd say you got a good half-inch, I don't know, 1.5 centimeter jaw width there. So yeah, very useful and a nice addition. Here is the pliers. You might think that a folding pair of pliers is kind of silly, and I won't lie, I did it first too, but these actually turn out to be fairly useful. So there is some texturing here at the tip of the jaws. They are very well aligned. Trying to get this in focus here. Also does have some kind of teeth in here if you needed to turn a small bolt or wiggle a screw loose or anything like that. I use these frequently to untie knots because they are nice little tiny pliers, and sometimes I don't always have fingernails, so this can come in handy. This back portion right here is supposed to be a wire crimper, although I've never really used it myself, haven't done much electrical work, so I can't really speak to how functional that piece is. And then right here is a little thin gauge wire cutter, and let me see if I actually have some wire to cut. Okay, we may be pushing it here. Here's a piece of wire I had for another video. Just kind of get it in there. Yeah, this is probably a little too big, but something like paperclip gauge wire or something like that shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, didn't throw off the jaws at all. It has a very similar spring mechanism to the scissors, a groove in there and a replaceable bent spring. Let's see. Here's a, oops, sorry, I just cut my nails, so having a little bit of trouble opening these guys up. Here's a magnifying glass, so you can look at my ugly thumb up close. Woo! Very functional. This is actually a piece of glass in here. I know that because I cleaned this tool out with isopropyl alcohol before thinking about whether or not this lens was plastic or glass. So yeah, it very functional, does what you need it to. I don't know the level of magnification. I'd say probably about a 3x lens or so. But yeah, very functional. And if you need a magnifying glass on a daily basis, I don't see why not. You could potentially start a fire with it as well. This is undoubtedly one of my favorite tools on here. This is a almost full profiled Phillips head. And the way they achieve this is rotating it about 45 degrees with respect to the alignment right here. So instead of having these tips kind of in line this way, they rotated it, and yeah, kind of splits the difference between all these little metal ridges that form the actual driver head. And yeah, as you can see, it kind of hangs out in a halfway open position as well as being fully extendable. So yeah, very useful and very nice to have this extra leverage available if you need to drive something that's being a little bit more difficult than you would otherwise prefer. Okay, and we've got the can opener. I don't know if I've used the can opener on the SwissChamp. Have used other Victorinox can openers. It does function. I never really understood why they put another flathead here. Seems kind of odd because if your screw has any kind of depth, you start running into the bladed portion for your can opener. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this nub in here. I could just do with a plain old can opener. But yeah, it functions and does what it needs to. Here's another nice driver tool. So stops halfway. This is the large flathead. It is tapered. Whoops, sorry. It is tapered right here, which I can't say I'm a huge fan of. I wish this were just the regular stock thickness all the way up. I suppose this helps it to fit into more flathead screws. However, it doesn't fit snugly, if that makes sense. So if you're fitting a smaller tool into a larger gap, it has wiggle and therefore puts wear on your actual screw that you're driving. So not really sure why they tapered it. It does also make a good scraper as well. I do a lot of scraping on a daily basis, so everything's a scraper if you use it for such. This is also a bottle opener and locks in the fully extended position as well. It is a good bottle opener. I've used it. Functions just fine. Doesn't put a hole in the bottle cap or anything for you bottle cap collectors. This is wire bending or wire stripping notch. Can't say I've used it for anything. It's not very sharp. Is this a wire stripper? Let's find out. I don't think it is. I think this is a wire bender. Let's see. Yeah, no, didn't really strip it. And this is the correct size wire. I wasn't being crazy on that one. So yeah, not really sure what that implement is. I don't really use it much. Wow, I think we covered everything. Yeah, so that is the SwissChamp. I've got to say my favorite aspects of this tool, the pliers were a lot more handy than I thought they were going to be. Straight pin came in handy for doing some vintage knife restoration, which was really nice. I love having a toothpick on me at any given time because when I eat lunch at work, like, you know, I don't want to go back into work, especially not with everyone wearing masks here in 2021, January. I don't want to be smelling my own breath and the food caught in my teeth, not to be gross. But yeah, that's invaluable. I do have a video about how you can drive a 90-degree angle using nothing but this tool and this pen. So I'll link that in the description. But yeah, overall, very, very functional tool that I have enjoyed carrying. Is not too big in the pocket, at least compared to something like, you know, the Leatherman Surge. The Surge is a very, very capable tool, but it is quite a brick in the pocket. So this is a slightly lighter option with actually more tool count, I believe. So yeah, it's been great. Favorite tools on here, I think, are the pliers, this Phillips head driver, the scissors are great. The blades are great. I mean, that goes without saying. Do like the straight pin. And, you know, the chisel and the reamer also come in handy quite a bit for me. So, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this review of the SwissChamp Swiss Army knife from Victorinox. I have multiple other Victorinoxes, including this Alox Pioneer X, I believe this one is. I also review knives and pens and notebooks on this channel, so if you like my content and want to see more, feel free to subscribe. If you like this video, hit like, and I hope to catch you at the next one. But thank you for joining me today. I've been Joe, and you've been watching Ink and Iron, and hopefully I'll see you on the next video. Bye.